Tim Kirby Russia hot takes. Are the Russians winning, losing, or stuck in the war in Ukraine? Now, one thing I have to say is after the tragedy of 9/11, it seemed like every person was some sort of genius architect engineer who knew everything about the way that buildings fall. And recently, due to a certain disease, it seems like I was surrounded on all fronts by certain immunologists. So let me just say this, that I am not a five-star general. I am not some sort of elite level military analyst. I have the ability and the means of most of you to observe what's going on in the conflict. So let's take some time to think about things and ask some questions. Now, the mainstream media tells a story that the Russian troops are really, really impoverished. They have no food. They're just like some random teenagers who are thrown out there and they can't do anything. But they can't really also deny the fact that essentially the first day of fighting, thanks to hypersonic weaponry that flies at 3,800 miles an hour, Russia basically took out all of Ukraine's air bases in a day. And their navy. One day from far away, just by pushing a button. Okay? But that's possible. Those two things could be true at the same time. Perhaps Russia's, because, in the Soviet Union, there was a lot of goofiness. There was a lot of weird things about how the Soviet Union was the second most powerful country in the world, yet you'd go to the store to buy a shirt, and there was like a bureaucratic procedure, and no fact that there be some sort of shirt there to even buy. So I think that there's some historical precedent to see some sort of dissonance like that. But if Russia also were, as the mainstream media implies, just sort of brutal and barbarous and just want to slaughter people, and they have the ability to knock out any target from within their own territory at the push of a button, why even bother with these grunts? What are these grunts doing? What are we doing with these starving teenagers? Just shoot. Because there's plenty more rockets where those came from. The mainstream media also accuses the Russians of moving very slowly throughout the territory of Ukraine. But as you watch sort of the daily maps of the war go on, it seems like, 10, 20 or so kilometers of territory on all sides is gained every day. Is that fast or is that slow? Well, I can tell you the Russian army expects every soldier, even the lowest level grunt, to be able to run 25 kilometers a day. I said run. 25 kilometers a day in a full set of armor, their full gear, and the gun. Another thing that the media doesn't seem to understand is that in the original fighting in the war in the Donbass, the main tactic that the pro-Russian sides used was what's called the cauldron. You sort of lure your enemy in, try to get around them, then you seal the cauldron by getting on all sides and pound away all day with artillery, which is what's happening in Ukraine. A lot of actual real military experts are saying that at least 2 or possibly 3 cauldrons are being created by Russia's maneuvers. So again, the question is it Russia going slow and being inept and being driven back? Or is it all part of some greater plan? One other aspect of things that people in the mainstream media refuse to admit or even think about or even dare speak is that Russians see the locals there as their own people. So it's kind of hard to, organize a total blitzkrieg war, a sort of like invasion of Baghdad, when you're trying to kill as few people as possible. This is why you should be able to find a lot of footage of Ukrainian soldiers being sort of just taken and set free. Because first off, half of them probably don't even want to fight. According to Russian intel, 4/5 of them don't want to fight, but that could be propaganda, who knows. So anyways, a lot of them are demotivated. A lot of them maybe even see themselves as being on the Russian side. So we're getting in a lot of people defecting, leaving, surrendering into that chaos. And again, the Russians don't really want to shoot their potential future citizens, you know what I mean? Because remember, the United States has fought some pretty bloody wars like Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan. And although the expression winning hearts and minds kept coming up, ultimately they just had to be blown into submission. Of course, with Vietnam that didn't work, but that's really the mission of when you are sort of building your foreign sea empire versus a land empire. The sea empire has the luxury of just killing the enemy into submission to get what you want from their territory. If you're a land empire and the people you are fighting against now are going to be your neighbors in a few days, you have to act a little bit differently or you're not going to have a land empire for very long. So do you believe the Russians are fighting this conflict in an effective or ineffective way? To be honest, that completely depends on your political beliefs or where you get your information from. I've had an interesting time following some of my favorite YouTubers who, because the mainstream media pushed that button, are now passionate pro-Ukrainians. And the way that reality looks from the news feeds that they get from the Ukrainian side looks to be completely the opposite. But I can tell you one thing, Eventually, one side is going to win and one side is going to lose. But guys, they're not sending hungry teenagers there. Like, seriously, that's just stupid. They're not sending hungry teenagers there. A giant professional army, the most powerful army possibly in the world, is not sending basically like homeless teenagers to fight. That's just not happening. Okay, that's just not.